Who the Sumerians were and how they recorded the world. The Sumerians created one of the earliest and most advanced civilizations in human history, emerging in the fertile plains of southern Mesopotamia around the late 4th millennium BCE. Their cities, administrative systems, and knowledge networks were unprecedented. But what makes the Sumerians particularly fascinating is their meticulous recording of both ordinary and extraordinary phenomena, ranging from agricultural output to celestial anomalies, demonstrating an early attempt to understand the interplay between the cosmos and Earth. Lunar observations and the calendar. The moon was central to Sumerian timekeeping. Monthly cycles were carefully observed, with records noting the new moon, first quarter, full moon, and last quarter. Priests and scribes tracked lunar eclipses, unusual shadows, and irregularities in the moon's appearance. These observations allowed them to establish a lunar calendar, which guided agricultural practices, religious festivals, and city planning. Beyond mere dates, scribes recorded the moon's position relative to key stars and constellations, noting correlations between lunar phenomena and river levels, rainfall, or crop success. For example, a sudden darkening of the moon was often associated with impending environmental stress, such as droughts or localized flooding. Planetary movements and wandering stars. The Sumerians carefully monitored the 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Known as wandering stars, their irregular movements across the sky were documented over decades. Observers noted retrograde motion, brightness variations, and unusual trajectories. These observations were cross-referenced with terrestrial events such as crop failures following the appearance of a bright object near Venus, localized flooding after a rare planetary conjunction, social or political upheaval coinciding with Mars appearing unusually close to Jupiter. By the late 3rd millennium BCE, Sumerian cities faced serious environmental and social challenges. Recurring floods, droughts, and soil salinization affected agriculture. Every disaster was recorded as a distinct event. Myths about gods punishing humanity arose later, while primary records remained factual, noting the time, location, and consequences of each event. Patterns could be identified to anticipate future hazards. Knowledge and governance. Every recorded observation had practical importance. Kings relied on priestly knowledge to prepare cities for river floods, allocate grain during droughts, plan and reinforce dams and irrigation systems. Observation and recording were integral to governance. As records accumulated, archives grew, symbols were standardized for rare events, and unusual occurrences could be compared to previous experiences. This systematic knowledge helped cities survive. Sumerians essentially connected the heavens and earth through systematic observation, documentation, and analysis. Their records provided early predictive knowledge of natural events and created a framework that allowed subsequent generations to understand and respond to both terrestrial and celestial phenomena. Priests often acted as observers, carefully tracking celestial events and environmental changes. They recognized that natural disasters and unusual phenomena often coincided, and they sought patterns in these occurrences. When floods, droughts, or other catastrophic events occurred, priests examined the sky for signs or anomalies. Religion and governance were inseparable. Kings relied on priests' interpretations before making major political decisions. Understanding natural laws complemented symbolic explanations of divine action. Cities and their infrastructure. Sumerian cities, Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Nippur, were not merely settlements. They were centers of administration, culture, and knowledge. Uruk, the first major city with temples and ziggurats serving as observation centers. Nippur, religious capital with extensive astronomical archives. Lagash, economic hub with a complex irrigation system and meticulous records of climate events. Ur, documented floods and alluvial layers from river overflows. Water control was critical. Canals, dams, and reservoirs were both practical and observational tools. River levels were measured, flood events documented, and agricultural impacts analyzed. Astronomical observations. Sumerians had a surprisingly accurate system of observing the sky. Moon, observed for phases, new moons, full moons, and eclipses. Sun, tracked for seasonal changes and agricultural timing. Planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn were carefully followed. Constellations, used for orientation and as seasonal markers. Eclipses, considered significant omens, unusual phenomena. Bright lights, comets, meteors, or fire-like streaks were recorded as warnings. All observations were preserved on clay tablets, noting date, time, and effect on Earth, such as flooding, drought, crop failures, or disease. Recording disasters. The flood is a tool, not a catastrophe. In Sumerian texts, the flood is never described as punishment. This is important. It is called the cleansing of the surface. Water, they believed, does not destroy knowledge. It removes the carriers who have gone too far. Civilizations that began asking the wrong questions. When man begins to believe he is the source, the cycle ends. After the flood, the teachers left. Not because they perished, but because their presence became dangerous. Humans began to worship them, and worship meant distortion. Before leaving, the teachers gave the Sumerians a task: to record everything so that it would look like myth, like a story, like religion, so that those who were not ready would not hear. Such correlations were not always understood scientifically, but were recorded systematically. Over generations, these records formed a repository of predictive knowledge, linking celestial events to earthly consequences. Constellations as temporal and seasonal markers. Constellations were critical tools for both orientation and seasonal planning. Groups like the bull, the lion, and the fish served as calendars for planting, harvesting, and religious observances. Yet the Sumerians also used constellations to record extraordinary celestial phenomena. Meteor showers, comets, or sudden streaks of light were plotted relative to these familiar star patterns, allowing future observers to locate and interpret similar events. Eclipses and omens. Solar and lunar eclipses were meticulously recorded. These events were seen as significant omens, often indicating natural or societal disruptions. Detailed observations included exact timing of onset and duration, color changes in the lunar disk or solar corona, associated terrestrial effects, such as floods, famine, or disease. Scribes sometimes annotated these events with advice for kings or priests, suggesting protective measures, ritual observances, or preparations for potential disaster. Unexplained phenomena. In addition to regular cycles, Sumerians documented phenomena they could not explain. Bright streaks in the sky, often called fire from the heavens. Sudden flashes or atmospheric explosions. Strange colors or movements in celestial bodies. Every detail was recorded: time, direction, brightness, duration, and observed effects on the environment or society. These meticulous records were intended to build patterns that could warn future generations of similar events. Planispheres and tabular records. Some tablets, such as early planispheres, visually mapped the positions of planets, stars, and extraordinary events. These maps allowed observers to compare rare phenomena across years or decades, predict reoccurrences of certain events, correlate celestial anomalies with floods, fires, or crop failure. Tabular records included daily or monthly entries, listing date of observation, celestial object or phenomenon observed, environmental or societal consequence, recommendations for preparation or ritual action. Through these systems, the Sumerians essentially developed a proto-scientific methodology for correlating observations with outcomes on Earth. Disaster prediction and management. The Sumerians' observations were directly tied to city survival. By noting patterns of celestial and terrestrial events, they could predict seasonal flooding or drought, allocate grain reserves in anticipation of shortages, reinforce dams, canals, and urban structures, guide citizens through ritual or practical preparation for natural disasters. Even if the underlying causes were not understood in modern scientific terms, the Sumerians' combination of systematic observation, record-keeping, and analysis provided a functional early warning system. Social and political implications. Astronomical records were not only scientific tools, but also instruments of power. Kings relied on priestly interpretations to make political decisions, settle disputes, and legitimize rule. A king who ignored celestial warnings risked civil unrest or crop failure, while those who followed the advice of priest observers could secure prosperity and survival for their city-state. Legacy of knowledge. The meticulous system of observation and recording created a cumulative archive of knowledge. Over centuries, this repository allowed new generations of scribes to detect recurring patterns, understand rare events, and apply lessons from the past. Sumerians effectively laid the foundation for predictive astronomy, disaster awareness, and the integration of empirical observation with social governance. Sumerian astronomy and rare celestial events. The Sumerians' systematic observation of the sky represents one of the earliest examples of proto-science in human history. They meticulously recorded celestial phenomena, rare events, and anomalies, creating a repository of knowledge that integrated both practical and extraordinary observations. These records were not mere myth or superstition. They were careful, empirical notes meant to guide agricultural, social, and political decision-making. Planets and wandering stars. Sumerians closely tracked 5 visible planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. These wandering stars were distinguished from the fixed constellations and meticulously recorded for brightness, trajectory, and relative positions. Over decades, they noted retrograde motion, when a planet appeared to reverse its usual path across the sky. Conjunctions, alignments of 2 or more planets, which often coincided with extreme weather events or societal disruptions. Unusual brightness, variations that could precede floods, droughts, or even fires. Such observations were not random. Repeated occurrences were compared over years and centuries, forming early predictive models linking celestial movements with terrestrial outcomes. Constellations and seasonal indicators. Constellations served as markers for both navigation and seasonal cycles. Groups such as the Bull, Taurus, the Lion, Leo, and the Fish, Pisces, guided agricultural planning, religious observances, and city administration. Sumerians also plotted unusual events against these constellations. Cometary appearances and trajectories. Meteor showers or fire streaks across the sky. Strange planetary phenomena. These visual mappings allowed future generations to locate similar events and anticipate their potential impact on the Earth. Eclipses as omens. Solar and lunar eclipses were particularly significant. Observers recorded exact timing, including start and end. Changes in color or luminosity. Coinciding terrestrial events such as flooding, famine, or epidemics. Eclipses were often interpreted as omens requiring ritual action, but they also functioned as practical warnings. Certain eclipses preceded seasonal or environmental anomalies, allowing Sumerians to correlate celestial patterns with real-world consequences. Comets, fire streaks, and unexplained phenomena. In addition to predictable cycles, Sumerians documented phenomena beyond ordinary explanation. Bright streaks or fiery lines in the sky, potentially meteors or comet fragments. Sudden flashes or atmospheric explosions. Objects appearing to move against normal celestial patterns. Every observation included details, direction, duration, brightness, trajectory, and any immediate effect on rivers, fields, or populations. Such meticulous attention allowed priests and scribes to identify recurring phenomena and potential patterns. Planispheres and observation tables. Some Sumerian tablets included planispheres, schematic maps of the night sky showing the positions of planets, stars, and rare phenomena. These maps enabled observers to compare events across years and decades, track anomalies relative to familiar star patterns, create early predictive frameworks for anticipating rare or dangerous events. Tabular records complemented visual mappings, dates and times of observation, detailed descriptions of celestial objects or phenomena, observed consequences on Earth, ritual or practical recommendations for cities and leaders. Through these records, Sumerians developed a methodical system for correlating celestial events with terrestrial outcomes, effectively creating a proto-scientific predictive model. Connection between sky and Earth. Sumerians consistently observed correlations between celestial events and earthly phenomena. Cometary appearances often preceded floods or violent storms. Retrograde motions or conjunctions sometimes coincided with crop failures. Eclipses could precede social unrest, disease, or environmental stress. These observations were cataloged carefully to ensure knowledge could be applied practically. Predictive patterns were gradually refined over generations, demonstrating an early understanding of the universe's influence on human life. Disaster preparedness and administration. The meticulous recording of celestial phenomena had direct applications in governance, allocating grain and water reserves during expected droughts, preparing cities for flooding or soil salinization, timing rituals and festivals to maintain societal cohesion, guiding construction of canals, dams, and protective infrastructure. Even if the underlying mechanisms were not scientifically understood, Sumerians relied on correlations to inform decisions critical for survival. Social and political significance. Astronomical observations reinforced power structures. Priests and scribes interpreting celestial events held significant influence. Kings relied on their advice to legitimize rule and implement preventive measures. The ability to predict or interpret anomalies enhanced political authority and societal stability. Observation and record-keeping thus served both practical and ideological functions. Knowledge transmission. Through systematic observation and detailed record-keeping, Sumerians created an archive of knowledge spanning generations. This continuity allowed detection of recurring celestial events, early forms of pattern recognition and forecasting, integration of empirical observation with ritual and administrative practice. The Sumerian approach laid the foundation for later civilizations' astronomical, mathematical, and meteorological knowledge, blending observation, analysis, and documentation into a functional system for understanding and preparing for natural and cosmic phenomena. Tablets, floods, and extraordinary phenomena. The Sumerians meticulously documented not only regular celestial cycles, but also catastrophic events on Earth. Among the most significant of these were the periodic floods of the Tigris and Euphrates, which often devastated cities and agricultural lands. Clay tablets, etched with cuneiform writing, served as both administrative and observational records, capturing the timing, scale, and consequences of these natural disasters. Floods as epochal events. Floods in Mesopotamia were not merely annual occurrences, but, on several occasions, catastrophic events that reshaped settlements and altered the course of civilizations. Archaeological evidence indicates layers of alluvial silt, sometimes several meters thick, separating pre-flood and post-flood occupation layers in cities such as Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur. These layers demonstrate that ancient Sumerians experienced sudden, large-scale inundations capable of destroying buildings, granaries, and infrastructure. Sumerian tablets reflect these events with precise dates and descriptions. Some tablets describe river levels rising unusually quickly, breaking embankments, and inundating fields and homes. Others document emergency measures, such as moving livestock to higher ground, stockpiling grain, and reinforcing canals and dikes. These records highlight a sophisticated understanding of the environment and an early form of disaster management. Celestial correlations. Sumerian scribes often linked floods with unusual celestial phenomena. Bright objects in the sky, comets, or streaks of fire were frequently observed in the days or weeks preceding major floods. For example, records from Lagash describe a fiery storm moving against the Bull just prior to an unprecedented river overflow. Observations of Venus and Mercury in conjunction were sometimes associated with periods of excessive rainfall or drought, suggesting an early recognition of cyclical patterns. Lunar eclipses occasionally preceded particularly devastating floods, noted as signs requiring ritual preparation or emergency action. By maintaining these detailed correlations, Sumerians effectively developed an early predictive system for environmental events, integrating celestial and terrestrial observation. Tablets as records of both the practical and the extraordinary. Clay tablets served multiple functions. They recorded agricultural yields, labor contributions, and water distribution, while simultaneously documenting extraordinary phenomena. Flood layers and river levels, exact measures of depth, duration, and affected areas. Celestial anomalies, comets, meteors, or unusual planetary alignments. Ritual guidance, instructions for priests and officials on how to respond to observed omens. This dual-purpose record-keeping allowed Sumerians to maintain both practical administrative control and cultural continuity, blending observation with ritual and myth. Flood myths and epic narratives. The catastrophic floods also gave rise to rich mythological narratives. The Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, recounts a great deluge that destroys cities and reshapes the world. While symbolic in nature, these myths preserve elements of historical events. Key points include waters rising to the heavens, reflecting extraordinary flood levels. Destruction of entire settlements, corresponding to archaeological evidence of collapsed buildings. Survival strategies of chosen individuals, paralleling emergency preparedness documented on tablets. In essence, Sumerian myths encode empirical observations in a narrative form, ensuring that knowledge could be transmitted even as original records deteriorated over centuries. Unexplained celestial phenomena. Alongside floods, Sumerians documented phenomena that could not be immediately explained. Some of these records suggest awareness of cosmic impacts or atmospheric events. Fire streaks in the sky, potentially meteors or fragments of comets entering the atmosphere. Bright lights or explosions, sometimes associated with immediate environmental effects, such as fires or sudden storms. Irregular planetary motion, noted in conjunction with social unrest or environmental disruption. Scribes provided dates, directions, duration, and observed impacts, creating a systematic archive of unusual occurrences that could be analyzed over generations. Practical implications for society. The combination of terrestrial and celestial observations served multiple functions. Predictive preparedness, grain storage, labor allocation, and infrastructure reinforcement based on expected floods or droughts. Social cohesion, rituals tied to celestial events reinforced community bonds and compliance with authorities. Political legitimacy, kings and priests relied on these records to justify decisions, maintaining order during crises. By integrating observation, myth, and administration, Sumerians created a resilient system for managing both natural and societal challenges. Archaeological correlations. Excavations provide tangible evidence that aligns with textual records. Ur and Uruk, destroyed homes, damaged canals, and remnants of flood layers correspond to tablet descriptions of sudden inundations. Lagash, fire layers overlay flood deposits, reflecting the dual impact of water and associated environmental disasters. Nippur, partial collapse of temple structures, and archives mirrors recorded episodes of exceptional flooding. These correlations affirm the accuracy and reliability of Sumerian record-keeping. Early risk management. Sumerians recognized that natural disasters were inevitable. Their response systems included cataloging previous events to anticipate recurrence, preparing emergency storage of grain and livestock, reinforcing dams, levees, and urban infrastructure, educating new generations of scribes and priests to continue systematic observation. By approaching environmental hazards with a combination of empirical observation, documentation, and ritualized guidance, the Sumerians laid the groundwork for predictive and adaptive management of disasters. Integration of knowledge. Flood records were not isolated observations. They were integrated with other fields of knowledge. Astronomy, correlating celestial anomalies with terrestrial disasters. Agriculture, adjusting planting and harvesting cycles based on predicted flooding. Engineering, constructing infrastructure resilient to water and storm events. Mythology, encoding historical lessons in narrative form for cultural continuity. This holistic approach highlights the sophistication of Sumerian civilization and its ability to survive and adapt to complex environmental and cosmic challenges. Cosmic impacts and their effects. While floods and seasonal changes shaped Mesopotamia, the Sumerians were also aware of rare, extraordinary events originating from the sky. These included cosmic impacts, such as meteorites or comet fragments, which had the potential to devastate cities, alter climates, and reshape landscapes. Observations of such phenomena were recorded in cuneiform tablets, blending empirical documentation with ritual interpretation. Observing fire from the sky. Sumerian texts describe objects appearing as fiery stars or arrows from heaven streaking across the sky. These events were noted with precise details. Direction and trajectory, describing the movement from horizon to horizon. Brightness and size, variations indicating potential magnitude or threat. Duration, time from appearance to disappearance, sometimes in seconds or minutes. Impact or associated effects, fires, storms, or sudden flooding often followed these observations. Some texts hint at impacts in distant regions, suggesting awareness of cosmic events beyond the immediate vicinity. While the Sumerians could not measure velocity or mass, their careful observation created a record of rare astronomical phenomena. Correlation with terrestrial disasters. Certain cosmic events were linked with environmental changes and disasters. Fires or explosions preceded regional floods, potentially due to atmospheric disturbances. Bright streaks were often followed by river overflow or infrastructure damage. Unusual planetary alignments coincided with periods of social disruption, famine, or disease. By correlating celestial anomalies with terrestrial consequences, Sumerian scribes created an early observational database that could inform city planning and disaster preparedness. Case studies and tablets. Several surviving tablets document extraordinary events that may correspond to cosmic impacts. Lagash Tablet 21 describes a bright star splitting the sky, followed by flooding in northern canals. Early risk assessment. Through consistent recording of cosmic and terrestrial phenomena, Sumerians developed early forms of risk management. Predictive observation, using repeated patterns of celestial events to anticipate environmental consequences. Resource allocation, preparing granaries, livestock, and labor for imminent disruptions. Urban reinforcement, adjusting infrastructure to withstand potential floods or fires. Education and training. New scribes learned to document events precisely, ensuring continuity of knowledge. Integration of knowledge systems. Sumerians integrated multiple knowledge domains to understand and respond to cosmic impacts. Astronomy, observing and mapping unusual celestial events. Meteorology, recognizing patterns in weather following sky anomalies. Engineering, reinforcing infrastructure to mitigate environmental consequences. Administration, coordinating city response, grain storage, and labor management. Mythology, encoding knowledge symbolically to ensure transmission across generations. This integration reflects a sophisticated awareness that the cosmos could influence terrestrial life, and that careful observation and record-keeping were essential for survival. The flood, catastrophe, and Sumerian records. While the Sumerians carefully observed the sky, they were equally attentive to terrestrial catastrophes. Among these, the great floods of Mesopotamia were both recurring and devastating, leaving lasting impacts on cities, agriculture, and social structures. These floods were recorded with remarkable precision, offering modern researchers insights into both environmental events and Sumerian approaches to disaster management. Archaeological evidence of flooding. Excavations of ancient Sumerian cities such as Uruk, Lagash, and Nippur reveal thick alluvial layers, sometimes several meters deep, indicating sudden and severe flooding. In Uruk, flood layers overlay previously occupied residential areas, with evidence of rapid water inflow destroying houses and storage facilities. At Lagash, layers of silt and ash indicate that floods were sometimes accompanied by fires, possibly triggered by lightning, atmospheric disturbances, or even cosmic impacts. Nippur's temple complexes show structural collapse and sediment accumulation consistent with major inundations. Sumerian tablets as disaster records. Clay tablets serve as primary sources for understanding the Sumerians' approach to floods. These tablets recorded water levels in rivers and canals, duration and extent of flooding, damage to homes, temples, and granaries. Emergency measures implemented, such as evacuation of livestock, reinforcement of dams, or relocation of grain stores. Some tablets even contained instructions for priests and officials, detailing rituals meant to appease gods or ensure favorable outcomes during and after floods. Correlation with celestial events. The Sumerians often associated major floods with unusual celestial phenomena, comets or fiery streaks in the sky preceding rapid river overflows. Planetary alignments indicating periods of heavy rain or drought. Lunar eclipses sometimes coinciding with unexpected inundations, interpreted as divine warnings. This practice suggests an early form of environmental forecasting, blending observation of both sky and earth to anticipate natural disasters. Myths and the epic tradition. The catastrophic floods inspired some of the earliest mythological narratives in human history. The Epic of Gilgamesh recounts a great deluge destroying cities and reshaping the world. Though symbolic, these stories encode historical truths. Waters rising to the heavens reflects extraordinary flood levels. Destruction of entire cities aligns with archaeological evidence of collapsed structures. Survival of chosen individuals mirrors emergency preparedness measures documented on tablets. Such narratives preserved knowledge in a culturally resonant form, ensuring that lessons could survive even if physical records were lost. Environmental and social consequences. The floods had profound effects on Sumerian society. Urban restructuring. Cities had to rebuild infrastructure, often improving canals and levees. Population displacement. Migration from flooded areas altered demographic patterns. Leadership challenges. Kings and local governors were judged based on their response to disasters. Failures could lead to political upheaval. Economic disruption. Destruction of crops and granaries required redistribution of food and labor. By documenting these events, the Sumerians developed strategies to reduce vulnerability and increase resilience against future floods. Celestial observations and disaster correlation. Scribes meticulously recorded rare celestial events that often preceded or accompanied flooding. Comets and meteors, bright objects moving across the sky, sometimes followed by heavy rains or storms. Eclipses, solar or lunar eclipses noted as omens of environmental upheaval. Unusual planetary behavior, retrograde motions, or alignments sometimes linked to adverse weather or social instability. This systematic correlation of sky and earth events illustrates a sophisticated observational science, blending empirical data with predictive interpretation. Disaster preparedness and administration. Floods required proactive measures. Sumerians implemented granary management, stockpiling food in anticipation of crop loss. Infrastructure reinforcement, strengthening canals, dams, and city walls. Labor organization, mobilizing citizens for emergency repairs and construction. Education, training scribes and priests to continue systematic observation and documentation. These measures demonstrate that Sumerians not only recorded disasters, but actively applied knowledge to mitigate their impacts. Integration of observation, myth, and practical knowledge. Flood records were part of a broader system of integrated knowledge. Astronomy, identifying potential warnings from the sky. Agriculture, planning planting and harvesting cycles based on predictions. Engineering, designing resilient structures and water management systems. Mythology, encapsulating historical events in narratives for cultural transmission. This multi-layered approach reflects the Sumerians' understanding of their environment and the importance of preserving knowledge across generations. Legacy of Sumerian disaster management. The Sumerians' approach to floods and related catastrophes laid the foundation for later civilizations. Their combination of observation, documentation, and practical response influenced Babylonian flood management and irrigation systems, Egyptian Nile flood predictions and engineering, Mesopotamian risk assessment practices that informed urban planning for centuries. Through careful recording and systematic analysis, the Sumerians ensured that both empirical and cultural knowledge about disasters survived, shaping the development of science, administration, and myth in human civilization. The last impact, hypotheses and Sumerian records. Beyond floods and seasonal variations, Sumerian records suggest awareness of rare cosmic events that had potentially catastrophic consequences. While traditional narratives focus on terrestrial disasters, clay tablets and planispheres hint at celestial phenomena that could have included meteorite impacts, atmospheric explosions, or cometary fragments entering Earth's atmosphere. These events, though infrequent, were meticulously recorded and correlated with environmental and social effects. Observations of fiery objects. Sumerian texts describe celestial objects appearing as fiery stars, arrows from heaven, or celestial torches streaking across the sky. Observers noted Trajectory and direction. Objects moving from horizon to horizon. Duration and speed. Some visible for minutes, others appearing instantaneously. Brightness and color, ranging from faint glimmers to dazzling lights. Associated terrestrial effects. Fires, lightning, storms, and unusual floods. These observations indicate a keen awareness of rare cosmic phenomena and an attempt to document them for future reference. Correlation with catastrophic events. Some cosmic events appear to have coincided with destructive outcomes. Fire streaks often preceded regional floods or soil destabilization. Atmospheric flashes may have triggered secondary fires or storms. Planetary alignments coincided with droughts, famine, or political instability. Through careful documentation, Sumerian scribes attempted to link celestial anomalies with earthly events, creating an early framework for understanding cause and effect relationships in natural disasters. Tablet evidence and interpretations. Several surviving artifacts provide evidence of these observations. UR Archive 12 mentions a star splitting the sky, followed by flooding in canals and fields. Lagash Tablet 34 describes fiery rain leading to destruction of crops and temporary displacement of inhabitants. Nippur Planisphere marks unusual celestial objects, including bright streaks and non-standard planetary movements, suggesting rare occurrences over decades. These records suggest that Sumerians were not only observers, but also attempted to anticipate future events by studying patterns of recurrence. Mythology as a record of cosmic impacts. Many Sumerian myths encode these cosmic events symbolically. Stories of fire raining from the sky may reference meteorites or atmospheric explosions. Tales of cities destroyed by divine wrath could reflect sudden disasters caused by impacts or extreme weather following celestial phenomena. Heroes surviving deluges or fires parallel actual emergency responses documented in administrative records. By encoding empirical observations into myths, the Sumerians ensured knowledge would persist even when clay tablets were damaged or lost. Societal and political implications. Cosmic events influenced governance, ritual, and social organization. Priests and scribes interpreted celestial anomalies to guide kings in decision-making. Rituals and ceremonies conducted to appease perceived divine forces associated with cosmic threats. Urban planning. Cities reinforced structures and redistributed resources in anticipation of unusual events. Leadership evaluation. Kings were judged by their ability to respond to celestial warnings and protect citizens. Thus, observation of rare cosmic phenomena was both a scientific endeavor and a tool of social governance. Archaeological correlations. Excavations corroborate textual records of extraordinary events. Layers of ash over flood deposits suggest combined environmental and cosmic impacts. Burned structures and sediment disruptions correspond to periods when tablets report fiery objects in the sky. Sudden soil changes and erosion patterns indicate rapid, high-energy events consistent with meteor impacts or atmospheric explosions. These correlations strengthen the hypothesis that Sumerians accurately observed and recorded rare cosmic events with terrestrial consequences. Predictive record-keeping. By maintaining long-term records of celestial phenomena and their associated effects, Sumerians developed an early predictive system. Pattern recognition. Identifying recurring celestial events preceding environmental disturbances. Resource preparation. Allocating grain, labor, and livestock for potential disasters. Infrastructure adaptation. Reinforcing canals, dams, and urban layouts to withstand floods, fires, or shocks. Education and training. Passing knowledge to new generations of scribes and priests to maintain continuity. This systematic approach demonstrates the Sumerians' understanding that rare cosmic phenomena could influence human societies and necessitate careful preparation. Integration of knowledge. Sumerian civilization integrated multiple knowledge domains to respond to cosmic and environmental threats. Astronomy, monitoring and mapping unusual celestial events. Meteorology, observing weather patterns following cosmic anomalies. Engineering, designing resilient infrastructure. Administration, coordinating city responses and resource management. Mythology, preserving knowledge symbolically for long-term cultural memory. This holistic system illustrates the Sumerians' sophisticated approach to understanding the interconnectedness of the heavens and earth. Legacy. Sumerian records of rare cosmic impacts left a lasting legacy. Their systematic observation, documentation, and analysis influenced later civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and beyond. They created a model in which celestial and terrestrial events were recorded, correlated, and integrated into social, political, and religious life, a framework for early science, risk management, and cultural continuity. Legacy of the Sumerians and cosmic knowledge. The Sumerians left a legacy unmatched in early human history. Through meticulous observation of the heavens and careful recording of terrestrial events, they created one of the first integrated systems of knowledge. Their records encompassed floods, droughts, meteor showers, comets, eclipses, and potential cosmic impacts, forming a proto-scientific framework that combined empirical observation, administration, ritual, and myth. Preservation of knowledge. Clay tablets, planispheres, and administrative records preserved detailed accounts of celestial and terrestrial phenomena. The Sumerians developed standardized symbols and numerical systems to represent time, quantity, and observation details. This standardization allowed knowledge to be transmitted across generations with remarkable accuracy. Date and time. Observations were meticulously recorded by lunar, solar, and planetary cycles. Celestial events, comets, meteors, retrograde planets, and eclipses were logged systematically. Terrestrial effects, flood levels, soil salinity, droughts, fires, and societal disruption were noted alongside celestial occurrences. Recommendations. Scribes and priests suggested practical and ritual responses to anticipated events. By ensuring detailed and systematic recording, the Sumerians created archives that later civilizations could build upon. Integration of science, myth, and administration. Sumerian civilization demonstrates a unique integration of empirical observation, systematic documentation of phenomena, predictive analysis, correlating celestial and terrestrial patterns to anticipate disasters, administrative planning, coordinating grain storage, labor mobilization, and city defenses, mythological encoding, preserving historical events in symbolic stories, ensuring cultural transmission. This multidimensional approach allowed Sumerians to adapt to environmental and cosmic challenges and laid the foundation for future scientific thought. Influence on later civilizations. Sumerian records influenced Babylonian, Assyrian, and even Egyptian astronomy and administration. Babylonian scribes inherited Sumerian methods for predicting eclipses, planetary motion, and seasonal flooding. Egyptian Nile management benefited from understanding cycles and correlations between celestial events and river behavior. This chain of knowledge illustrates how meticulous observation, record-keeping, and pattern recognition created continuity across civilizations. Cosmic awareness. One of the most remarkable aspects of Sumerian civilization was their awareness of rare cosmic events. Comets and meteors, observed and linked to environmental effects. Atmospheric explosions, recorded with attention to trajectory, brightness, and terrestrial impact. Planetary alignments, noted as potential indicators of climate or social disruptions. By recording these events systematically, Sumerians created one of the earliest forms of predictive science. They recognized that the universe had forces capable of impacting human life and sought to understand and respond to these forces. Social, political, and religious significance. Sumerian observation of cosmic and environmental phenomena had profound implications for society. Priests and scribes held significant influence due to their ability to interpret celestial signs. Kings relied on these interpretations to maintain authority and protect cities. Rituals conducted to mitigate perceived divine wrath or influence cosmic events. Urban planning adjusted in anticipation of floods, storms, or other natural disasters. Observation, documentation, and ritual combined to maintain social order, ensure survival, and legitimize political power. Lessons in risk management. Through centuries of record-keeping, Sumerians developed principles that resemble modern risk management. Pattern recognition, identifying recurring events and correlating them with impacts on Earth. Preparedness, stockpiling resources, reinforcing infrastructure, and planning for emergencies. Continuity of knowledge, training new generations of scribes and priests to maintain archives and observation practices. Integration of empirical and symbolic knowledge, using myths to encode practical lessons for long-term cultural memory. This approach demonstrates that Sumerians were early practitioners of applied science, even when framed within a mythological and religious context. Final reflections. The legacy of the Sumerians reveals a civilization that understood the interplay between sky and earth more profoundly than often recognized. They observed, recorded, and interpreted rare and ordinary phenomena alike, creating a repository of knowledge that informed governance, urban planning, disaster preparedness, and cultural continuity. Their observations of cosmic events, floods, and environmental changes suggest a sophisticated awareness of patterns and consequences, combining empirical methods with symbolic storytelling. The integration of astronomy, administration, engineering, and mythology reflects a multidimensional intelligence capable of anticipating disasters and preserving knowledge across generations. Conclusion. Sumerian civilization stands as a testament to humanity's early capacity for observation, analysis, and foresight. By linking celestial and terrestrial phenomena, they created a system that not only served immediate survival, but also laid the foundation for scientific and cultural development for millennia. From floods and droughts to comets and meteors, the Sumerians recorded a world in motion, providing insights that continue to intrigue modern researchers and inspire curiosity about humanity's earliest understanding of the cosmos.